shifts in the afternoon program. The one thing about us, when we come to a church, we do take up the whole Sabbath day. That's what we do. And so we go right until sundown. Here's what we're going to do, because it is a long day and there are young people here, etc. I'm going to wait a moment or two so everyone is in that is going to be in, and so everybody will know what's going on. I will make an announcement about something else. I always bring with me, and I never know what to call it, special gems, little booklets that I don't have enough to give to everyone, but they are really good in terms of Adventist teaching and history and various things, small booklets, just like the Amazing Facts style. And so if you would like what I call some of my special gem booklets, please ask me for them, and I will be delighted to give you some things to take home with you that you would really appreciate. And so that is up to you. Ask me, and I will be happy to provide some things for you. And in addition, don't forget the website and the YouTube. Matthew told you how to access the website, DennisPriebe.com, and our YouTube channel. So we're continuing to use those as avenues to get our messages out as far as we can. And so don't forget about that. All right, here we are. We're going to start this meeting at 2:30. It'll probably last, my presentation will probably last till 3:15 or thereabouts. And then what we'll do is I'll open it up for a short time of questions if you want that, and it'll be totally up to you. You can ask questions or not. That'll be your decision. And so then after our short question period, Matthew will present what they call Creation Spotlights, a 10-minute program on just various facets of nature, and I have no idea what he's going to choose, so we'll wait and see what that is. And it'll be just something very special on nature for 10 minutes, especially for the young people who are here. So that will be and then we'll take a break. After we finish the Spotlight program, we'll take a break, and short break. And then we'll begin the next meeting at approximately 4 o'clock. We'll be flexible on times. And I will again, after that meeting, open it up for questions. Then we will have another Creation Spotlight. And we're talking now about maybe 5:15 or something like that. And then there will be a break for supper, for a light break for supper. And then we will have the 7 o'clock presentation by Matthew on the predators as scheduled. And that will go until sundown, and then after sundown, our books and our DVDs will be available. So that's the schedule, just a little more packed in during the day. And I realize some people might have to leave early, and we hate that, but we know that's a reality. So that is the way we'll go from here. Let's see if there's anything else. One thing to remember, none of Matthew's materials can be live streamed for those who are watching on live stream, either the Creation Spotlights or the 7 o'clock program on the predators. I think if you can stay for the 7 o'clock meeting, you'll really be fascinated by who created the predator. Listen, how did a lion decide it liked gazelles better than grass? You tell me. That's a change in the brain of the lion. The brain desires things that it never thought of as food before. That requires a change in the dental structure, in the teeth. That requires a change in the gastrointestinal system of how the food is processed. Everything about the animal, except the outer appearance, changes to become a predator. And so how does that happen? Who's involved in making this change? So I think you'll find that fascinating. That's an area where very few people have ever even theorized about how it might happen. And Matthew's going to do his best to make sure that we have at least some inspired evidence for how it could happen. So I hope you can't stay for that one. That is kind of a special program that Matthew doesn't do very often. Okay, ready to start? Let's just pray, shall we? Father in heaven, guide us as we study this very important subject of our future right here in the United States of America. I pray in Jesus' name, amen. All right, Matthew, I need to give you this. And are you going to be up here? All right. I'll wait a moment till they get the screen set. There it is. We're good. Thank you, everyone. All right. First of all, I'm going to start with a story. An incredible story. I mean, really beyond belief. A small group of Adventist youth heard God calling them to reach people who are living in a very dangerous and difficult area. But before moving ahead, they made sure they spent a lot of time in prayer to ask God's will as to how they would pursue. Along Tanzania's Indian Ocean coast lies a town of more than 8,000 inhabitants. The town is predominantly a non-Christian faith, as is typical of that area, with more than 99% of its inhabitants belonging to another religion. It's known to be a highly superstitious town, causing a lot of people to fear the inhabitants of that town. Several attempts have been made over the years to reach the people in that town with the gospel, but none successful. So in the year 2000, a group of young people, and I'm talking about teenagers, a group of young people decided to conduct an evangelistic series in that town. Knowing the work before them was difficult and dangerous, they decided to spend several weeks in prayer to know what God's will was for that area. Amazingly, a few days later, after they made their request, they received permission from the town elders to hold an evangelistic series in that town. And so it became public knowledge that young Adventists would be holding meetings in the town. They continued to pray earnestly, and they chose to have their prayer times early morning by the seashore. They decided that would be their prayer time session. And the young Adventists met every morning faithfully by the seashore before dawn, crying out to God for the townspeople in that area, that they could be reached with the gospel. One morning, a few young people were sent by some very determined elders of the town to stop these meetings, and they were going to do the most dramatic and desperate thing you can imagine. They sent young people to kill the Adventist young people because they knew they'd be meeting at 5 o'clock in the morning by the seashore, and that would be the time to get rid of this menace to their society forever. So one morning, the would-be killers went out to the shore, found the Adventist youth kneeling in prayer just as they thought they would. As they approached, ready to kill them, all of a sudden the attackers saw a wall of fire between them and the Adventist young people. And of course that terrified them, and they ran immediately from the scene back to the village. The Adventist young people just went on with their plans. Whether or not they knew what had happened, we're not sure. But they went on with their plans and started the meetings. But the elders were determined again to stop these meetings, stop them completely. And so they sent the youth again, this time to steal their equipment and the projectors and everything they were using, because they were holding meetings in an open area and there was nothing to keep them locked up. So one night, the young people approached the place where the equipment was kept, and the would-be attackers saw a very tall man wearing a white gown, holding a shining sword, walking around all of that equipment. And once again, it didn't work, and they failed to carry out the plan. Finally, the elders got so fed up, they said, "The youth, you are cowards, you don't know how to do these things, we will take matters into our own hands, we'll take care of this once and for all." So As the meetings were going on in the open area, two elderly people dressed in full village regalia walked through the crowd heading toward the front where the Adventist was preaching that evening. But before they reached the front, the town elders started running and jumping, shouting, "We're burning! We're burning!" And immediately after that, they rushed toward the preacher and just went out behind him completely and left him alone. No one saw any flames. No one saw anyone burning, nothing at all. And the attackers acted as if they were on fire. Later, the same leaders explained how they wanted to attack the preacher. They were going to attack him, but they saw a wall of fire surrounding that preacher that night. Well, after this, the young men of the town approached the Adventist young people saying, "You've got better magic than we have. Tell us what your magic is. We want to learn how to do these things." And of course, the Adventist youth told them they didn't believe in these superstitions, and they told them about the God who protected them that evening, and in several occasions. It became a big story all across the town. Everybody knew about it, and even a reporter from a national newspaper of that area came out to investigate and report the story. Well, there are now 3 organized churches in that village with a total membership of about 200 people. How about that, for the Lord turning things completely around? Let's read a text, shall we? Because the Lord prophesied exactly this situation, believe it or not, in the Old Testament. It's in the book of Zechariah. Wow, that's one of those hard ones to find. You know, tucked away back there in the minor prophets. I'll give you a minute to find it. Zechariah chapter 2. Let's read this prophecy of of the story I just shared with you. Zechariah chapter 2 and verse 5. "For I, saith the Lord, will be unto her a wall of fire round about, and will be the glory in the midst of her." How about that? Right there, in exactly the words, a wall of fire round about. Let's see what Ellen White has to say about this. Heavenly angels, there we are. Heavenly angels bend lovingly over them and are as a wall of fire round about them. Sanctified Life, page 13. One other, in Heavenly Places, page 30, "We shall walk among the angels. They will be like a wall of fire about us, and we shall one day walk with them in the city of God." Has God made provision for desperate situations? All right, who will qualify for protection by a wall of fire? And I say anyone who is doing the will of the Lord and has prayed his or her way through it. Anyone who is making sure that the Lord is leading out in this whole procedure. Well, I wanted to start our presentation with that little encouraging story. A sample of the Spirit was seen 130 years ago. Towards the end of the 19th century in the United States, there was a religious movement that felt compelled to launch a campaign to formally recognize Sunday as the day of rest in the United States. They wanted to unite the country. They wanted to make the country come back to its original morality. They wanted to bring people back to church on Sunday. So different Protestant churches and some reform groups and some temperance groups joined together into a political religious coalition. Okay, a political religious coalition. And they found a champion to lead their cause. His name was Republican Senator Henry W. Blair, a staunch prohibitionist and an ardent Christian. He proposed a national Sunday rest bill, Senate Bill 2983, on May 21, 1888. This would have amended the U.S. Constitution, not just a law, but an amendment to the Constitution to establish Sunday as the mandatory day of rest for everyone under the jurisdiction of the United States in the name of education. Commercial transactions would have ceased, public amusements would be closed, Interstate commerce would be suspended. All festivities, secular activities, parades, and military drills would be forbidden on Sunday. After Senator Blair introduced his legislation, his fellow lawmakers referred the Sunday rest bill to the Senate Committee on Education and Labor, and testimony was heard by that committee. Alonzo T. Jones, a Seventh-day Adventist pioneer in this area, spoke boldly and clearly before the United States Senate Committee, December 13, 1888. How about that? A significant date in Adventist history. December 13, 1888. He said, "The government has no right to make any law relating to the things that pertain to God, or offenses against God or religion. The government has nothing to do with religion," he said. Attempting to legislate the Sabbath was a terrible infringement that both the Bible and the U.S. Constitution strongly prohibited. He added that even if the government reflected the will of a majority, it had no more authority than has a king or a pope to violate the God-given liberty of conscience and freedom to worship. Government should leave religion to every man's conscience and his God. Well, that was basically his testimony. And these words left a lasting impression upon those U.S. senators that day. And as a result, the Sunday Law Bill and Christian Education Amendment failed to receive the necessary votes even to get it out of committee. And it died right there in the committee. But Senator Blair was unfazed by this defeat. He resubmitted variations of the same Sunday rest bill in 1889, but in every instance he was met with the same fate, failure to get the necessary votes to get it out of committee. Great victory for God and religious liberty. But it wasn't over yet. In 1892, the Sunday law agitators were able to make up some ground again with a national Sunday law. A new bill, Senate Bill 2168, the purpose of this bill, to prohibit opening on Sunday any exhibition or exposition for which the United States government makes appropriations. The bill was essentially saying that if the U.S. government were to fund any major event, fairs or otherwise, Sunday would have to be kept sacred. That was the bill that was introduced. It was done in anticipation of, up to that time, the largest, most significant commercial event in the history of the United States. It was called the Colombian Exposition, more commonly known as the Chicago World's Fair of 1893. Even though the bill failed to pass the Senate, didn't work, got through committee, didn't pass the Senate, it inspired another effort to push Sunday law through. This second measure was introduced through the House of Representatives. It was called Sunday Civil Bill, loaning $5 million to the Chicago World's Fair, conditioned on Sunday closing. And believe it or not, this House bill passed. And it became law on August 5, 1892. The Sunday agitators finally had achieved their objective through some stealth. And remember, this is not just any fair. This was a fair that would last 6 months, and it would draw international visitors, and it had 65,000 booths and exhibits, bigger than anything we're doing these days. Unknown to everyone, the event planners for the Chicago World's Fair met together behind closed doors, and they retracted the decision to close down the fair on Sunday. They saw a big financial benefit for staying open 7 days a week, and they didn't want to lose that day of revenue. So they opened the fair on Sunday, and all 65,000 booths and exhibits began to conduct their business, and the people came in droves, hundreds and thousands of people daily. Well, as you can imagine, this caused a volatile response from the ones who had presented the bill, angered them greatly, and they demanded that everything be closed immediately, close it down. They began to picket, they began to campaign, strong denunciations, began a national debate over this issue, and the Sunday agitators began to lobby Congress to just enforce the law. It is a law. Even the Roman Catholic Church took advantage of all this controversy about Sunday. The famous Roman Catholic Cardinal Gibbons from Chicago gave his famous Rome's Challenge during this period of time, during the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. He wrote a series of articles which openly challenged Protestants as to why they keep Sunday holy, since they were fighting for something that belonged to the Roman Catholic Church and was not found in the Bible. Very interesting document, still using it today. Rome was laughing at the controversy as they saw Protestants trying to enforce something which the Bible was totally silent about. And again, for the glory of God, Alonzo Jones met the challenge. Again, in 1892 and 1893, he took up the challenge. He denounced the oppression by the national churches using the arm of the state. In 1892 and 1893, he stood before the U.S. Congress and spoke to the House Committee on Colombian Exposition. This time he came to the signed petition of over 350,000 people who said this was a bad bill and should not be enforced. So the government backed off, and they refused to enforce the law. It was law, but you know, law is only good when it's enforced. And they refused to enforce the law. So out of this whole thing came two clear voices. Number one, Rome's clear statement that Sunday is her mark, is her day, belongs to her, doesn't belong to the Protestant churches. Number two, there will always be someone that God will call to stand up in favor of truth. It might be you. He will always call someone that will stand for truth during these times. So that kind of is the same thing in a legislative sense of what the young people were protected by over in Africa. All right, let's bring the issues down to our time now. The world saw a lot of shocking images as rioters forced their way into the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. One of the most disturbing was a large flag unfurled outside the Capitol, designed to look something like a campaign banner. The flag suggested that the unfolding chaos had an endorsement from an unlikely source. It read simply, Jesus 2020. Jesus 2020. And there's no doubt that the ideology known as Christian nationalism motivated at least some of those people who rampaged through the halls of Congress that day. They wanted to restore America to its greatness. Christian nationalism is very simple. It's an attempt to link Christianity with national identity. And it is simply saying that to be a true patriot, you've got to be a Christian, and to be a Christian, you must be a true patriot. Individuals believe that hostile forces are assailing a once Christian nation, and we've got to do something about it. We must battle to regain those areas that we have lost. So it's hardly surprising that the idea of Christian nationalism is shot through with threads of angry hate for anyone who is not in the majority, whether it's ethnic or whether it is religious. They just want no part of it. And the Seventh-day Adventist Church has been very clear on this subject. Christian nationalism is antithetical to our theology. We do not believe in Christian nationalism. The church, its various institutions, its representatives will never align with any political party or any political ideology. We will not seek political preference. We do not, quote, use our influence with political and civil leaders to either advance our faith or inhibit the faith of others. Seventh-day Adventists should not seek to harness political power to create a Christian public square. In all of its forms and variants, Christian nationalism will always damage our witness to the gospel. But these noble words have not always found an easy reception in Adventist modern practice. A pastor wrote recently of his plans to leave a very successful ministry career earlier than he had planned. He wrote this, "The last year has been tough. I have decided to retire. I have had a hard time figuring out how religion and politics got so tangled up in even the Adventist church." In even the Adventist church? His lament has been echoed a dozen times by others who tell of unprecedented conflict in the congregations or the institutions that they serve on this very issue, religion and politics. You see, honesty forces us to look at the ghastly spectacle of American politics, the winner-takes-all imperative driving partisanship and polarization on a scale I've never seen in my lifetime, and I've been here a few years. This is new, this is different. Not even the remnant church could be immune to the slash and burn practice of our modern political era. And so we have pitted people against each other. We have races pitted against each other. We have the protection of accumulated wealth against the less fortunate. We've made enemies of those who previously could sit down at the table and talk about some differences that they might have. The church kind of mirrors the culture, unfortunately. The church's struggle is always with itself, not with those out there. Can we covenant to live together with our differences of skin color, of wealth, and of political preferences? Can we covenant to live together? The word is humility, and that's the biggest and the hardest task of all. The gospel's call to teach and practice the virtue of humility is the most countercultural act of which our church can ever be part of. It doesn't work in our society. It should work in the church. Are we willing to listen patiently to each other if the other person has a thought that's different than ours? Are we going to acknowledge the possibility of our own mistakenness, that we could be wrong? That's humility. Will we gather around our shared commitment to the Lord? Humility is something to be prayed for. Without the quality of humility, the remnant church might be just a fractious, contentious body of people trying to force their ideas upon everyone else. And that is not the church. The witness that wins the world, didn't Jesus say, is to love one another. And love means humility. Love means listening. Love means care for the other person's opinions. There can be no community of believers without that. All right, now we're going to get to some very practical issues. And I'm going to say this. Some of you may have heard this next section already. If you've heard anything from David Qualls or read any of his material in the last few months, because I have depended very heavily on what you have, the research that you have produced on this subject. So some of you might have heard this before if he's talked to you about any of these subjects. Here we go. 1897. National apostasy. Wait a minute, next one. National apostasy will speedily be followed by national ruin. That is the simple statement she made in 1897. And some have read this statement and have concluded that the current pope is working to bring about the United States and the rest of the world under his dominion by means of a leftward shift in American politics and the nations. They conclude that socialism, globalism, environmental policies will bring the nation to financial ruin. But is this how prophecy portrays what is ahead in our future? And there's no doubt that Satan will use anything he can, left, right, center, any ideology that he can to foster his purposes. But inspiration is what we go by, not the current ideas of the day. Wouldn't it be better to allow the inspired writings to guide us rather than what someone says? Number one, there are several points here. The greatest danger to liberty in America is not an overbearing state or a leftist government controlling its people. The greatest threat to liberty is a combining of church and state instigated not primarily by a pope, but by Protestants. Here it is. When Protestant churches shall unite with the secular power to sustain a false religion, then will the papal Sabbath be enforced by the combined authority of church and state. There will be a national apostasy which will end only in national ruin. Let's break that down. Who are the impetus here? Not the Pope, not the Catholic Church, Protestant churches, and they unite with the state to sustain a false religion. And Sunday enforcement is the dominant issue. Church and state unite. This results in national apostasy, and this leads to national ruin. Number 2, in America, it's not Catholics that bring the tyranny, but Protestants. Romanism in the old world and apostate Protestantism in the new will pursue a similar course toward those who honor all the divine precepts. Great Controversy, page 615. Number 3, the greatest threat to religious liberty is not from the state, but from the apostate church. Great Controversy, 581. Let the principle once be established in the United States that the church may employ or control the power of the state, that religious observances may be enforced by secular laws. In short, that the authority of church and state is to dominate the conscience, and the triumph of Rome in this country is assured. Please notice who's in control. The church. The church. What do they enforce? Religious observances. What is it that assures the triumph of Rome in the United States? Is it a redistribution of wealth? Is it a great reset? Is it socialism? Is it environmental policies? Is it globalism? According to this, the Protestant church. The Protestant church controls the secular state and enforces religious observances. The pattern of the apostate church dominating the state is not new. Remember back there when Pilate tried to save Jesus from the cross? Who pressured him? Who made sure that Jesus would end up on the cross? The religious leaders did the pressuring. Dark Ages, same thing, right? The apostate Christian church dominated and controlled the state and persecuted millions. All right, another quotation. Well, the same one we started with, 1897. We quoted, "This national apostasy will speedily be followed by national ruin." And then some apply this to a looming threat of leftist welfare policies, of redistribution of wealth, of socialism, globalism, promoted by Pope Francis, welcomed by a new leftist government in America, and this is how the United States will come to ruin. That is being preached a lot right now in Seventh-day Adventist circles, how the whole thing will come to bear. But in the writings of Ellen White, the words national ruin is always in context of Sunday legislation. Always. National ruin, Sunday legislation, brought on by agitation, not from Catholic sources, but from leading Protestant churches. And the issue in the final conflict is always Sunday versus Sabbath, not capitalism versus socialism. Never is that even hinted at in the inspired writings. And just by the way, we talk about presidents and their churches' affiliations. Church affiliation isn't the best predictor of a government or a president's direction. There was a 2008 Washington Post article. George W. Bush could well be the nation's first Catholic president. What? How could that be? Yes, there was John F. Kennedy, but where Kennedy sought to divorce his religion from his office, Bush has welcomed Roman Catholic doctrine and teachings into the White House and based many important domestic policy decisions on them. Rick Santorum was a former U.S. Senator and a devout Catholic. He was the first to give Bush the Catholic president label. He said, "He's certainly much more Catholic than Kennedy." And the title of that article, "A Catholic Wind in the White House." So it doesn't have to be by a Catholic president. It can just as well be done by anyone that was willing to let the winds blow in that direction. All right, back to the religious legislation, joining of church and state. Next quotation. When our nation, in its legislative councils, please notice, shall enact laws to bind the consciences of men in regard to their religious privileges, enforcing Sunday observance, and bringing oppressive power to bear against those who keep the seventh-day Sabbath, the law of God will to all intents and purposes be made void in our land, and national apostasy will be followed by national ruin. Bible Commentary, Volume 7, page 977. Please notice, when our nation in its legislative councils, not something decreed by a president, not something proposed by the Supreme Court, but by legislative direction. And then this one, Last Day Events, 132. To secure popularity and patronage, legislators will yield to the demand for a Sunday law. Now, who's going to demand that? The atheists, the agnostics, the globalists, this group, that group? No, it's going to be Bible-believing Christians. Let's get back to church on Sunday. Same thing that happened in the time of A.T. Jones. Exactly the same thing in new dress. So the demand comes from the people to the legislators. And the legislators don't even initiate it. They have to debate it, but they don't initiate it. They yield to the pressure from religious people. Last Day Events, 132. What's that? Did I skip one? Yeah, no, I did that one, 132, and the same thing. So did I? The next one is this, Go back one. So I didn't quote. All right, I'll read it to you. If I did, I thought I quoted it. You did this one. Protestants are following in the steps of papists. Okay. That's part of the same page. All right. So I didn't quote it. I thought I put it on the screen. Okay. But that's great controversy, not Last Day Events. Well, it's in both. It's in both. I have listed Great Controversy 573, Last Day Events 132. Protestants are following in the steps of papists. Nay, more, they are opening the door for the papacy to regain in Protestant America the supremacy which she has lost in the Old World. So you see, there is a difference between Europe and the United States in these issues. Inspiration repeatedly warns us against the danger of civil and religious liberties being destroyed from Protestantism, not from Catholicism. Catholicism will agree to it, will be happy with it, but it will be initiated by leading Protestant churches of America, just like it was in the 1888 period, moving to compel everyone to follow the way they wanted it to be. So once again, I'm going to say, as far as David has found, as far as I have found, nowhere do the writings of Ellen White indicate that America will impose a left-wing, atheistic, humanistic system of tyranny. Some call it soft tyranny, as a prelude to a reactionary response from the right wing. That is nowhere in our inspired predictions of the future. And here is a crucial statement from Great Controversy 592. Even in free America, rulers and legislators, in order to secure public favor, will yield to the popular demand for a law enforcing Sunday observance. Will yield. Please notice that. Where is this going to happen? In a tyrannical America? In a leftist government-controlled America? Even in free America, legislators will give in to the pressure for the enforcement of Sunday observance. America will be free at the time of the Sunday law. Shouldn't we trust God on this one and let the inspired words be our counsel? Well, that's basically what I wanted to share with you. I'm going to conclude with a encouraging statement. I don't think it's on the screen. Prophets and Kings? It is. Okay, let's read it. Among earth's inhabitants, here it is, good. Scattered in every land, there are those who have not bowed the knee to Baal. Like the stars of heaven which appear only at night, these faithful ones will shine forth when darkness covers the earth and gross darkness the people. In heathen Africa, in the Catholic lands of Europe and of South America, in China, in India, in the islands of the sea, and in all the dark corners of the earth, God has in reserve a firmament of chosen ones that will yet shine forth amidst the darkness. Even now they are appearing in every nation, among every tongue and people. And in the hour of deepest apostasy, when Satan's supreme effort is made to cause all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive under penalty of death the sign of allegiance to a false rest day. Please notice, a false rest day. These faithful ones, blameless and harmless, the sons of God without rebuke, will shine as lights in the world. The darker the night, the more brilliantly will they shine. Isn't that encouraging? Prophets and Kings 188 and 189. I'll leave you with a very thoughtful comment on the great controversy, purely fictional. Whom have you left behind to carry out the work? Asked the angels. A little band of men and women who love me, replied the Lord Jesus. But what if they should fail when the trial comes? Will all you have done be defeated? Yes, if they should fail, all I have done will be defeated, but they will not fail. I think that's what Jesus is saying right now, and will be saying it all the way down the line. In another poem, wilt thou follow me, the Savior asked. The road looked bright and fair and filled with youthful hope and zeal. I answered, anywhere. Wilt thou follow me? Again he asked. The road looked dim ahead, but I gave one glance at his glowing face. To the end, dear Lord, I said. Wilt thou follow me? I almost blanched, for the road was rough and new, but I felt the grip of his steady hand, and it thrilled me through and through. Still followest thou? 'Twas a tender tone, and it thrilled my inmost heart. I answered not, but he drew me close, and I knew we would never part. The road lies through Gethsemane, my friends. It does. We will experience that kind of fear. Through the city gate outside the camp, the way lies alone for us. We will not be able to go in groups or in churches. There will be no trace of a footstep to follow, only a still small voice, follow me. But it leads to the joy set before him and to the Mount of God. This will end well, but it will not end as some are theorizing today. And that's why I wanted to make this presentation. Okay, that's what I wanted to say. Now, I'm going to open it up for a question or two, if you would like. And this is your time. If you would like to have a little time for questions, yeah, I hit about 3:15, I guessed right. So if you have any questions, you are welcome at this point to ask a question or make a comment. I have no burden on this at all to anything that you want to do. One in the back there.
I think it's important, though, to acknowledge, though, that there's a goading in the world right now where we have a blatantly overt, sinful group of people goading the Protestants, which I think is the devil on both sides.
Sure it is.
Pushing
Sure.
the Protestant churches to retaliate. And I
Yeah.
think that's Satan's work on both sides.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to note that. And I appreciate the church actually stating that we are not of a single party. We don't support either or. Mm-hmm. So it's important for us to keep our eyes focused on Christ and not become so opposed to one side that we ultimately end up aligning with the other because they're both
That's right.
not following Christ. It's important to note that I think that a lot of people miss that because they want to be so against this that they almost fall into the camp of the other without acknowledging it.
We are in that period of American politics where you're either my friend or you're my enemy. And do we really fully realize we are citizens of another country, another kingdom? We do not belong to America. We are grateful for America. We are grateful for its freedoms. We cherish them. But we are not Americans first and Christians second. We are Christians, and we're grateful for what America has provided. So your thoughts are to the point. Yes?
Is there chance or any indication that there could be a combination of church and state on some other issue first, enforcing religion through secular power, and some other issue, and then that'll make it easier to get to the Sunday law later?
It's possible. It's possible. But do we have any inspired evidence that it will take place? Yeah, we do not. As far as I have been able to tell, as far as David, and I thank you for your research, David, you haven't found any inspired evidence that it's going to come from that kind of pressure, from the left pushing the right. I'm sure that will happen, and that has happened and will continue to happen. But in these areas, I'm much more comfortable staying with what inspiration has told us will happen rather than speculating as to what could happen. You see, the issue of let's say secular people getting all excited about Sunday as a rest day to keep the country going ahead, that seems pretty far-fetched. Will they want to quit going to football games on Sunday? Will they want to quit all the sports that are going on every Sunday? The basketball finals are going on right now and everybody is rooting for their teams. Will they want to say, okay, we'll stop all recreation so we can have Sunday as a rest day? I doubt it. I doubt the pressures are going to be there from the people who are wanting to enjoy the fun of Sunday in secular ways. They will only come from those who will be wanting to get back to the Bible, wanting to make sure that everybody follows the teachings of the Bible as they interpret it. So that's the only place where I can see of any unified pressure for the legislature of the United States to act at all. I just don't see it from the left side. Anyone else? Comment or thought? Right here? Or right there? All right.
Yeah, well, based off what you just said, I think it kind of answers my question. But I wanted to ask you if, if it's not the Pope, if it's not, the left and all that stuff, and it's mostly going to be Protestant Christians, those that believe in, Sunday sacredness, wouldn't there have to be they would have to be the majority, right? Mm-hmm. In order, unless, based off what you just said, I'm thinking those that it could be a minority, but they have enough power to influence. That's
the issue.
Okay.
It will be a very listen, if we're talking about things that demand minorities or majorities, there's a big debate on abortion going on right now, right? And I don't want to get into that debate. I don't want to even, go down that road. But is it the majority of the United States of America that's wanting to repeal Roe versus Wade? Or a very strident minority that believes that we are killing people, therefore we need to change the law? It's the minority. The ones who are protesting the way that the government went back then in 72, 3, whatever. So the pressure is always going to come from a strident minority. And right now, the strident minority in these areas is evangelical Christianity. They are not the majority in the United States. The Catholics are by far the majority in terms of one denomination. And the Protestants still outnumber the Catholics, but not by much anymore. And so it's going to be the strident voices of the evangelical minority that is going to push for Sunday legislation. Even the liberal churches aren't going to push much for Sunday. They'll go along with it, but that isn't what they want is justice for the poor. They want fairness for minorities. They're pushing for civil justice. Only the Bible-believing evangelicals are going to push for religious totalitarian control. That's how I see it. Anyone else?
What do the Protestants believe?
What do the Protestants believe? Boy, they believe everything under the sun, let me tell you. Protestants are about as divided as any group of people you would ever come across. Some believe that we should have everybody equal, and therefore, whether you are man, woman, gay, straight, everyone else should be entitled to the benefits of Christianity. Others say, no, that's wrong. Everybody disagrees with each other. The Catholics kind of are together. Well, maybe. There's a lot of difference among Catholics, but certainly not among Protestants. Okay?
It's a quote that said, there's people everywhere that God has chosen. How do you explain that to somebody like that would say, oh, so God chooses?
God chooses. God chooses. How many are called and how many are chosen? That's an interesting statement, isn't it? All are called. God is calling every single human being to repent and be saved. Not many of them accept the call, the word chosen. It doesn't mean that God is doing the choosing. It means that we make our choices and therefore live by our choices. Free choice demands that everyone choose for himself or herself. Never one for another. Never the government for the people. Never one religion for another group. Free choice demands that everyone makes that choice for himself or herself. Therefore, the gospel is always calling everyone. Everyone is called, not many who accept the call. Yes, one more back there.
It's said that towards when we get the National Sunday Law, that the Word of God is going to be difficult to find. And it makes sense because if you truly read the Bible, what it says, there's no indication that anybody should be worshiping on Sunday.
Yeah.
How are we going to go from now, where you can get a Bible anywhere, including online, to the point where people can't go look things up for themselves?
You know how? The Catholic Church during the Middle Ages decided they would make sure that they would be the only interpreters of the Bible. How did they do that? They refused permission for anyone to own a Bible. They chained the Bible right up here in front, and only the priest could interpret the Bible. You could not own and have a Bible. Now, what has happened since all kinds of Bible translations are in existence, and the Bible is in every country and in every translated part of the world, and everyone has access to a Bible these days? How does the Catholic or Protestant, apostate Protestant churches relate to that? Well, you see, not everything in the Bible is inspired. There are ideas in there that are legends, like God created the earth in 6 days, and then there was a big flood that came along and wiped everybody out. Come on, that's totally unscientific. There is no one who believes anything as crazy as that. And how in the world can we believe these stories of Jesus? I'll tell you a little example. There's a group that meets twice a year called the Search for the Historical Jesus Group, because they have decided that not everything in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John was original with Jesus. People added stories later, and they're going to tell us which stories are authentic and which stories are not authentic. And so what we have today is the opposite of the attempt during the Middle Ages. Sure, here's a Bible. Read it for yourself. Just don't get bogged down in the idea that it's literal. There are a lot of things in there that are purely speculation and purely legend. And doesn't that accomplish the same purpose? Yeah, go ahead.
So when we were in the midst of the pandemic and the world shut down
Yeah.
for months at a time, and we saw such a drastic change in the environment,
Yeah.
how do you think Adventists will react because I think that will be part of
The next time around.
part of the, well, not so much maybe a pandemic, but maybe the push
I know,
that we
I
need
know.
a day of rest because
know.
the environment requires it or whatever. Because I'd heard and I'd read some stories, some articles back then during the pandemic that maybe we should institute a day for the world, 1/7 of a week. Can you imagine what kind of an impact that could have on the environment? We are caretakers of the earth. That's what
Yeah,
God asked us to be.
that's
How will
right.
we rationalize those thoughts with it becoming? I mean, we're in favor of that, right?
Yep.
A day of rest. That's
Yeah.
But how will we rationalize that as a church, as a people, when that becomes maybe one of the pieces of the institution?
First of
Sunday
all,
law?
when the pandemic has set us up, do this or else. We're going to mandate this. We're going to make sure you do this. Everything is setting us up for us to follow along meekly. So it is setting the stage. The pandemic is not the world crisis that will lead to a Sunday law. It is setting the stage for people to think in a certain way. So how will we respond when the pressure is on from various groups? I would say this. Now, Matthew might be able to add a little bit to this. I don't know. I would say that certainly those who are talking about the environment and how we must protect our environment and save our environment, which is a legitimate concern. It is. We don't want our rivers, our oceans to rise and flood New York and San Francisco. We don't want things like that to happen. And so it's a legitimate concern. Will they have the initiative, the courage, the willingness to stand and say, we've got to have Sunday as a rest day? I doubt that. Okay, Tuesday would be fine. Since everybody is worshiping on Sunday, well, that's convenient, so we could close down on Sunday too. They might follow along in that, but they aren't going to initiate that. And so the pressures that are going to come down are purely religious pressures, the only ones that we're going to be dealing with. We're not going to be having to deal with pressure to close down every Tuesday. The pressures will come to close down every Sunday for worship, not just as a day, but for worship. Matthew, do you want to add anything to this? Come on up here and share it, because you've been thinking about these things a lot these days.
This is something that I've talked about in my presentation, Misdirection and Guile, so I do have, some of the research done on this.
Available on our internet.
Yes, it's on our YouTube channel, Dennis Priebe Ministries. So here's the, I'm trying to condense it at this point, not people who don't care about the environment per se, they'll totally make that deal for Sunday. And Sunday is the obvious choice. There's no question Sunday is the choice that would be made. So the proposals have been made along those lines, including from Catholic sources, to have a one-day-a-week shutdown for those types of reasons. So now here's the issue that I see is really important to really think about with this. When we look at that, again, the environmentalists are not religiously motivated, but they'll make the deal. It will still be proposed from a dual aspect for the thing. We want to protect the environment, and we want to help increase our religious thing. So it'll be a hands across the gulf type of agreement. And so it still will be a religious issue. It will never be a secular, left-wing, isolated issue. It will be a religious joining with secular idealism on both sides. So that will still make it have a religious aspect. There will never be a point where it's not tied to a religious promotion at this point. And at that point, again, you now have the pushback. And again, nothing happens in a vacuum. You will have a promotion for this religious, environmental day of rest. Well, then everybody who doesn't care about the environment, and there's a lot of people in America who couldn't care less, are going to push back. And you're going to also have everybody who's not religious in America, and there's a lot of people who aren't religious in America who aren't going to have any interest in this whatsoever. And so the whatever power the combined environmental religious forces will have an equal or opposite power in the non-religious, non-environmental forces in America. And so there's going to, again, be this loggerhead like we have on everything in America. Nothing that is proposed by anybody has more than 50% chance, and it's usually less than that, of people who are supporting it. And so, again, you're not going to have anything which gets rammed through against the other side, because the other side will always put up roadblocks and will always politically fight, and it'll always have some sort of pushback that you'll, again, never achieve a pure goal like anybody wants to achieve. So the real question is this, and this is where I base all of this type of speculation on. What will allow an end-time event scenario for everybody to get on board with Sunday law legislation? And I'm talking about any form, even small form, but I mean, it's like it'll get worse and worse as it goes. It's going to start small and get bigger and bigger and bigger until we finally have a death decree. But that doesn't start with a death decree. What is going to get everybody on board with a national day of rest in one form or another? At this point, there is nothing being proposed by anybody from any perspective, by the left or the right, as to where we're going to have enough of a compelling argument that will convince everybody in America, except for a few weird Sabbath keepers, that we need to have a day of rest. And so for me, there has to be something more. And Ellen White refers to this in Christ's Object Lesson, page 412, an unlooked for calamity, which we don't know what it will be. It is not something we have seen yet. It is unlooked for. And we can speculate, but speculation is useless. And it's like, for me, that's not climate change. That's not a financial crisis. That's in terms of anything we're predicting right now. It's not something that we are used to. It's not something that we had a housing closure in 2008 that ruined our economy, whatever. I mean, we're not talking about normal times. Something has to be so desperate and so devastating. Worldwide, not just America, that everybody all of a sudden realizes if we don't do something, we're all going to die. An unlooked for calamity. And at that point, the people finally say, what do we need to do? And there will be a group of Americans which will tell us what we need to do. The combined apostate Protestant Catholic alliance, which will tell everybody what we need to do, and that is worship on Sunday or else. And at that point, it has to be so overwhelming that everybody from every background is convinced on this issue worldwide, and that we're talking about New Agers, Hindu, Muslims, atheists. Everybody has to be on agreement, on the same page with this, and all of a sudden say, whatever you say, let's do, and we'll follow, and the Pope will say, I will lead the way, and we'll say, yes, sir, whatever you say. There has to be something like that, and nothing at this point has been proposed which rises up to that level of coercion. And so, yes, there are murmurings of, let's do this, and there have been for a long time. I mean, the papacy has been promoting Sunday worship for centuries, so I mean, that's nothing new. And the environmentalists are willing to make deals with that, and so that's, something significant. But none of these things are big enough and strong enough to make sure that we all agree and we're all on the same page and everybody just says, yes, sir, we'll do whatever we have to do. So I do see all of those things as interesting and worthy of, paying attention to, but I don't see any of those things actually having the political clout and follow through to be able to force a Sunday law legislation upon an unwilling America. And again, remember, it's not going to come from, like he said, that in this program, it's not coming from the top down. It's not an evil president. It's not an evil pope. It's not a secret backroom deal of senators smoking in the back room of Washington who are going to think up, you know what, we're going to make this secret Sunday law and we're going to make it big and we're going to take over. It's like, it's not going to happen that way. It comes when the people demand it of their legislatures, so from the bottom up, not the top down. And so when they are at the point of annihilation and this is all we can do, at that point they will say, we need this, and the legislature will go, sure, whatever, and they will allow it to pass, and the president will sign it, and the Supreme Court will go, yes, it's great, and we will have a law that completely destroys our liberty. So at this point, we need to be looking more toward what the people are doing and not what the leadership of any country or even the papacy are doing. And for me, that is what is most important.
Thank you for sharing that, and I want to add one point to that. Yes, let's look at what the legislators are doing. Yes, let's look at what the nations are doing. Yes, let's look at what the Pope is doing. But none of those things will bring about the second coming of Jesus Christ. Amen. Revelation 7, 1-3. Hold the winds of destruction. Hold the winds until my people are sealed in their foreheads. When my people are sealed, then all of these things will break loose. The sudden unlooked for calamity, the people lining up all on the side of get back to God, then it will happen. The timing of the second coming of Christ is not dependent on left forces or even right forces. It is dependent on you and me being willing to pay the price of receiving the seal of God in our foreheads. Yes.
Actually, before we do that, I want to follow up on something here just to kind of tie into what was asked earlier. It is an important aspect of all of this, exactly what you were saying, was it going to take a majority or a minority? And right now, we have, like he said, a small, not a small, but a good-sized minority of people who are agitating for an issue, in this, what he mentioned, abortion. And that's really what motivates. If you can get your people into power, if you can get the people in the right place, you don't have to have a majority. And we see this throughout history. And it's like when we look at the history of the German rise of Nazism, at no point in the history of Germany did the Nazi party have the majority. They were a very small minority of the people during the entirety of its reign. And when they were rising in power during the 1920s, they were actually gaining, control of certain aspects of the government of the Weimar Republic to the point where they became noticed. But they were always a minority. And in fact, when they rose to their peak of democratic possibilities, they were only 33% of the Weimar Republic legislature. They were still only a third of that body in their governing chamber. And it was at that point, because they were so noisy, and because they were so committed, and because they were so aggressive that they got all the attention, that the head of the Republic, which I'm not going to remember his name right now, actually granted to Adolf Hitler power, which he didn't deserve. He handed him a role as prime minister, chancellor at that point, which his party's power did not warrant. But the party's noise level did warrant it. And their tactics warranted it. And so in order to get this guy to be, under control, they gave him a position of power which he didn't deserve. And from that point forward, then he consolidated his power, and then he started assassinating people, and then he took power in the 30s to the point where he became the top guy. You don't have to have a majority in order to be able to rise to the top of the heap. You just have to be tactically smart and have enough noise and have enough power backing you to be able to seize control when it counts. And Satan can enable that whenever it takes. So we're not looking for necessarily a 51% of Congress to be religious right affiliated and be able to have that, control to run the government or anything else like that. You need to have a smaller group which is so active and so aggressive and so noisy that they get more power than they actually deserve. And I think we're seeing that with the religious right of our time period right now. And we can actually look at a number of different cases through history where this has been true, where a small, active, vocal group actually seizes more power than they're really justified to have. And that's, I think, what we're seeing now. And again, even with that, they would never be able to pass Sunday legislation in this country, even if they wanted to, which some of them do and some of them don't. It varies on the evangelical individuals. But they would, at this point, if they tried to pass a law in Congress to start Sunday legislation tomorrow, that's a dead law. It's not going to pass in our Congress right now. There's no motivation for it. The people are not in favor of it. It's not something that will ever gain the ascendancy by itself. And so this is one thing that I think we need to be very wary of, is looking at the Sunday law legislation updates. You know, it's like there's a lot of ministries out there which are talking about what is happening over in this island and what's happening over in this country for Sunday law legislation, and it's going to happen here tomorrow if we're not careful. And I think that's dangerous, not because what they're saying isn't true in this country, in this island, and this place like that. That is actually accurate. But then to make predictions based upon what will happen in America, based upon these other isolated situations, is going to set us up as a disappointment every time it doesn't fulfill itself. And it will kind of, you know, the boy who cries wolf type of situation where every time we're saying Sunday law is coming tomorrow and it doesn't come tomorrow, how long are you going to listen to that as a, you know, as a people out there besides Adventists who are going to see this as just a bunch of people trying to raise money or whatever. You know, they're going to put the worst motivations upon this. So it's a kind of a self-defeating thing to be crying Sunday law over every issue that happens everywhere all the time. I think that hurts our witness in the long run. Let's wait for actual Sunday laws to actually take place before we say it's going to happen tomorrow.
And let's trust inspiration, my friends. Let's trust inspiration, not our best judgment. Our best judgment is usually not worth anything. One more point? Go ahead.
I think you had a mic in the... Oh, yeah.
There we are.
Yeah, in the front here. He was first. Okay.
Oh, all right. Who was first? I don't know. All right. Right here. Let's go first and then second.
Okay, yeah, I was trying to reconcile some of what I've heard over the past hour or so, and I think what I was hearing first is, you know, I think you were going out of your way, and the whole presentation was about perhaps we should just be watching just the Protestant world that would be pushing for Sunday legislation. And then Matthew got up, though, and basically said, well, it's going to take a big calamity, and the entire world, including non-Protestants and everybody else in the world will be pushing for it. Can you
How to work that out?
Explain that for me?
We're dealing with the difference, I think, between a national Sunday law and a universal Sunday law. I think it will take a worldwide calamity for a universal Sunday law to take place in any way, shape, or form for China and for India and all those nations to come on board with that. In terms of the United States, it might not be quite the same universal kind of pressure. Maybe there will be, I think undoubtedly there will be pressures, whether they're financial or economic or even climatic issues, that will get the folks fired up on the evangelical side to get back to God. They did it in the 1888 period. They'll do it again. Now, that's how I see the difference between universal and national. Don't know if it's right or not. I'm speculating.
Well,
and
every
we are in
country
agreement
follows
here.
the U.S., right?
What's that?
I said every country in the world follow. There's some
Yes,
quote about
they
that. so-
follow. That's right. That is one of Ellen White's statements, that everyone follows what the America does in this issue. So America leads the way. That is inspired information.
So you need some catastrophe then?
Well, okay, here's the thing. Now, there are stages to this that will start out small and get bigger. There will be things that will, not to go into every last detail here according to what we have read in Inspiration, but it will start out not with a death decree for people who worship on Sabbath. That's the last step. And it won't even start with everybody must worship on Sunday. No. That's toward the end as well. What it will start with is Sunday closing laws, where work stoppage, where, alcohol sales have already been on the books for, 100 years, blue laws in many different places, and they've never been removed. Those laws still exist on the books. They've just been ignored. And so those can be quickly revived as this is on the books, let's do it. And everybody goes, well, okay, it's on the law. So it's like that can be an easy kind of a baby step into this whole thing. So there's different stages of this where you can't work on Sunday, or even smaller than that, we can't sell on Sunday. And then it'll go to not work on Sunday. And then it'll go to everybody needs to worship on Sunday. So there'll be gradual stages of this. At what point does a catastrophe enter into this sort of thing? I'm not going to guess. I'm not going
later than sooner.
That's very likely, and so I'm not going to predict as to any kind of information as that.
What does Zimbabwe and Mozambique and those countries need to maybe they need the catastrophe, or
Yeah,
they've just
exactly.
following the U.S.?
Exactly. Once the U.S. sets the standard of what needs to happen, and once it's like leading the way on this sort of thing, everybody else will be like, huh, wow, they're doing weird stuff in America. And then all of a sudden a disaster strikes and like, oh, what do we need to do? Okay, let's look what America's doing. You know, like it totally changes the outlook from a indifferent kind of quizzicalness toward America to a let's get on board the bandwagon type of attitude. And so that any of this it can happen. And again, this is one thing I refuse to do, is start speculating possible scenarios, because everybody out there is making up 20 different things based on nothing, and I refuse to get into that.
Yeah,
So
you
it's
need
like,
to be bound heavily by spirit of prophecy. So
That's right.
That's all I'm asking. Is
And
within the bounds
exactly.
of spirit of prophecy, then.
I won't
and the Pope's
say-
got to obviously play a role in that as well. So he would be
Yeah.
very handy in bringing in Zimbabwe and Mozambique onto
That's
the-
right. I wonder more about, not even so those countries, I wonder more about the Arabian countries which worship on Friday. How are they ever going to be willing to have a Sunday closure and worship day? Because that is 100% different from everything they stand
Well,
for.
they just opened up the 3-day weekend.
Yep, that's right. They've just opened it up for a 3-day, not
So
just
that'll-
Friday and Saturday, but Friday through Sunday.
Yeah.
There's this
So
first stage.
That's a first step. That's right. So, yeah, so the point of what he was saying with his sermon, and this is really important, is that in America, the first beast, the first beast over in Rome is dependent upon the second beast in America. The first beast by itself has a deadly wound that is mostly healed, but not entirely. And it'll stay in that condition of almost healed but not quite until the second beast of America puts up an image to the beast which heals the beast completely. So the first beast, in many ways, the Catholic Church, is actually less powerful than the second beast. It's waiting for the second beast. And so the second beast actually has to do its part in order for the first beast to achieve its full power at the end of time. And so again, this is another reason why misdirection and guile, looking at the papacy for every single move it makes and every single step that the Pope takes, is less important than looking at what the Protestant world in America is doing, because that is the second beast and that is the catalyst. That is what will actually initiate all the end time events. And so we need to be focusing more on that than on what the first beast is doing. As a friend of mine, as somebody who heard my sermon on this issue said, I am very relieved that I don't have to worry every time the Pope sneezes. Because we don't need the Pope watch. We need the Protestant watch. That's actually more important, because they're the ones that have been predicted by inspiration as being the catalyst to the end time events that we're about to face.
All right, was there one more? Yes, you had a chance.
It's no secret there's ever-widening dissension in Adventism itself.
Yes.
Coming up in the next couple months, I believe, is the General Conference session.
Yes.
There are many who feel that this is one of the most crucial General Conference sessions in the history of Adventism. It seems to me that we are not willing to meet the iceberg head-on.
Yes, we haven't been
Do you
for a
have
long
any
time.
comments on this?
The iceberg of evangelical politics and theology we have been afraid to hit because, well, they're like us. They're our friends. They want to see the second coming of Christ. Never mind, it's the secret rapture, second coming of Christ, but otherwise. And so right here at this point, I'll just be honest with you. We aren't listening to the General Conference decisions anyway. Even if they decide something, I doubt we'll listen to them again. I'm getting pessimistic about this whole issue of when the General Conference in session speaks, what happens. So we'll see. We'll hope for the best. We'll hope there will be something important coming out of this General Conference coming up. But I'm not I wouldn't place too many bets on that. We'll see. But that's, again, speculation.
Just something that's mildly amusing here. We were at the 92 session in Indianapolis when the very first vote ever taken on women's ordination in a modified form took place. And the church in session, the General Conference in session, overwhelmingly voted against it. And so then, 4, 8 years, or 5, 10 years later, a second vote takes place. Again, against it, not as overwhelmingly as the first time. And then in the mid, 2015, or I think it was 2010, and the third big vote took place. And this time, again, the vote was against it. And again, shrinking, always a little bit shrinking, but still substantially more than 50% against it. And so those 3 General Conference decisions in session have accomplished what? Every conference is doing whatever it wants. They're, flouting the law. Our, Northern California and Southern California doing whatever they want. And it is like a committee system was set up by the General Conference a few years ago to process this thing and make decisions and recommend reprimands, and it was very complicated. And when I looked at that, I go, oh, that's never going to happen because it's just way too complicated. All the different steps involved, and there's no way all of those steps will ever get fulfilled in our committee system. And what has happened since that committee system has been set up? Nothing. Nothing at all. There hasn't been anything done to anybody despite continued defiance of the General Conference's decisions. So what will a new vote, even if it is taken, and I don't even know if there is a vote proposed at this point, what would a new vote accomplish? As long as the church is unwilling to actually put teeth into the disciplinary actions that it claims to have, the law will be flouted, and it will be ignored, and it will be defied, because that is the way you do things. You don't do anything until you're forced to by actual consequences, and at this point there have been none. And so unless the process of actually holding unions and divisions and whatever accountable takes place, no vote by the General Conference will matter in any way, shape, or form.
We know there's going to be a major shaking.
Yes.
Did you see a possibility of a major split taking place in the Adventist Church?
It could well happen. I fear that is as much a possible reality as any other. I'm praying with all my heart it doesn't happen. But you see, on the other hand, this umbrella that we have now that covers every kind of idea and says, well, you can believe this or that, whether the earth was created in 6,000 years or 2 million years, doesn't matter, or 20 million. You can be a good Adventist. All of that kind of thing needs a shaking, doesn't it? Desperately. And if a split is the only way that can accomplish that, other denominations have split. Would ours be one of those who would? I'm just going to wait and see. That is speculation. And I'm not going to make any predictions about what is going to happen. I would hate to see that split, but I'm hating to see what I see now.
The question might better be, is there going to be a split, or has the split already happened?
Yeah.
Because when we look at our church and the wildly divergent positions that are being held on every issue, it's not so much a two sides of a same coin anymore. We're basically two sides of the Grand Canyon being band-aided over with, goodwill. It's like at this point, we virtually have two churches going at this point in terms of gospels, of whether or not we can be saved in our sins or not. Those are two completely different positions, and are basically, worthy of two different churches. And to put the name Seventh-day Adventist over both of them is to kind of disparage the fact that we actually don't believe the same thing on many different issues.
Well, good questions. All right. I think one more. All right.
I just wanted to clarify something real quick, because I always thought the Seventh-day Adventist Church was a Protestant church. So I just Googled it, and it said, yes, the Seventh-day Adventist Church is Protestant.
Okay.
So in Ellen White's quotes, we're meaning the evangelical Protestants.
All
but
right.
we need to distinguish that, because someone, like Andre said, what do Protestants believe? And I thought, oh, well, we're Protestant too, though. So we do need to clarify.
And that does need to be made very clear. There is one statement in which Ellen White was quoting Beecher.
Yeah, Charles Beecher.
In which he referred specifically, and it's in Great Controversy, I believe,
Great Controversy.
Referring to the evangelical Protestant churches. And so that has to be made very clear, that there is a huge gap between the evangelical Protestants and the more liberal Protestants. And then we fall into where? None of the above.
Neither.
None of the above.
That's right, the true Protestants, that's right. Her actual most common term that she uses throughout her writings when referring to this is apostate Protestantism.
Yes, apostate.
That is her normal term, not just Protestantism, because she does refer positively to Protestantism from the days of Martin Luther on. And so when she's talking about current, in her time, and future events, she's almost always using the term apostate Protestantism. Sometimes she uses religions of the day, and a few variations like that. In my sermon, Misdirection and Guile, I actually have a whole list of what terms she uses for that particular branch of Protestantism, which is going to lead us down to destruction. And but she does, in Great Controversy, refer to them through Beecher as the Protestant evangelical denominations. And that is word for word fulfillment of prophecy in our time. Word for word.
All right, here's what I'm going to suggest now. We're kind of shaping our time based on what we do. I'm suggesting it's time for a break right now. You've been sitting a long time. And it's 5 minutes to 4. Let's break for 10 minutes. I will begin my last presentation. Will we pass the test? No, I don't think so. I think we'll delete that for now. We need to take a break. We've been sitting too long. And so at 5 minutes after 4, will we pass the test? Is my last presentation. And then we'll have a spotlight. We'll have discussion. We'll see if you want discussion. We'll have a spotlight presentation for the younger ones. And then we'll take it from there. We'll see where we are. So we'll see you in 10 minutes.